Step away from the vehicle and show me your ID now.
Officer, this is my car. I just finished my shift here.
I didn't ask for an explanation. ID now.
What crime are you investigating?
You're being suspicious. Don't argue with me.
Asking questions isn't a crime.
Marcus, she has a hospital badge.
The hospital security camera captured everything. Every word. Every movement. Every constitutional violation that would cost the Phoenix Police Department $16.3 million and expose a pattern of misconduct so disturbing that it would lead to federal investigations, terminated careers, and a complete overhaul of how officers are trained on racial bias. Officer Marcus Webb had no idea that the exhausted woman standing next to the silver Lexus was Dr. Amara Mitchell, one of the most respected cardiothoracic surgeons in Arizona. She had just saved 2 lives in the operating room. She was about to end his career without raising her voice. Dr. Amara Mitchell was 46 years old and looked like someone who hadn't slept in 3 days because she hadn't. She had been on call at Phoenix Memorial Hospital for 72 hours straight. 3 emergency surgeries, 2 successful, 1 patient who didn't make it despite everything she tried. Amara specialized in complex heart procedures, the kind of surgery where 1 wrong move means the patient dies on the table. She had performed over 2,000 operations in her career. Her success rate was exceptional. Other hospitals tried to recruit her constantly. She stayed at Phoenix Memorial because it served one of the most diverse communities in Arizona, including many patients who couldn't afford care anywhere else. Before medical school, Amara had been a Division I athlete, track and field at UCLA. She still ran every morning when her schedule allowed. She was fit, disciplined, and had the kind of mental toughness that comes from years of making life or death decisions under pressure. She didn't panic. She didn't lose her composure. Even when everything was falling apart around her, Amara stayed calm and focused on the next right action. That Tuesday evening in August, Amara had finally finished her shift at 7:45. She was supposed to be off at 6, but an emergency case came in. A 42-year-old man with an aortic dissection. She spent 3 hours repairing his heart. He would live because of her skill. She changed out of her scrubs, grabbed her bag from her locker, and walked to the hospital parking lot. Her Lexus was parked in the staff section, same spot she used most days. She had worked at this hospital for 9 years. Security knew her. The parking attendants knew her. She had a staff parking permit clearly displayed on her dashboard. Amara unlocked her car, tossed her bag in the back seat, and was about to get in when she heard the voice behind her. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." She turned around. A Phoenix police officer was approaching with his hand resting on his service weapon. Not drawn, but ready. His nameplate read, Webb. His expression was aggressive, suspicious, like he had already decided she was doing something wrong. "Is there a problem, officer? I need to see some identification. Step away from the vehicle." Amara's medical training kicked in before her emotions could. Assess the situation. Identify the threat. Respond appropriately. Something was wrong here. She was standing next to her own car in a hospital parking lot wearing business casual clothes with a hospital ID badge still clipped to her shirt. What reasonable suspicion could this officer possibly have? "This is my car. I'm a surgeon at this hospital. I just finished my shift. I'm not going to ask again. Show me your ID and step away from the vehicle. Can you tell me what this is about? What crime do you think I'm committing?" Webb's jaw tightened. Most people he stopped just complied immediately. The badge, the uniform, the authority. Most people didn't ask questions. "We received a report of a suspicious person in this parking lot. You match the description." "What description?" Amara asked. "Because I'm a black woman in the hospital parking lot where I work? Ma'am, you need to calm down and cooperate." "I am calm. I'm asking you a legitimate question. What specific suspicious behavior was reported?" Silence from Webb. His hand stayed on his weapon. Another officer was approaching now, a younger white woman whose nameplate read Foster. She looked uncertain, like she wasn't sure why they were even doing this stop. Amara made a decision. She would comply, document everything, and handle this through proper channels. She had been a black woman in America for 46 years. She knew how these situations could escalate. She knew that being right didn't protect you from being hurt. Officer, I'm going to reach into my pocket and get my wallet. I'm telling you what I'm doing before I do it. She moved slowly. Her hand went to her jacket pocket. She pulled out her wallet and extracted her driver's license. She also pulled out her hospital ID badge, the one that clearly showed her photograph, her name, and her title, Dr. Amara Mitchell, cardiothoracic surgery. Webb took the license but barely glanced at the hospital badge. This your vehicle? Yes. The registration is in the glove compartment if you need to see it. Stay here. Webb walked back to his patrol car. Foster stayed with Amara, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Can I ask what the suspicious person report was about? Amara asked Foster directly. Foster hesitated. I'm not sure. Officer Webb responded to the call. Have you ever been stopped by police for doing absolutely nothing wrong? Most people haven't. Most people can't imagine what it feels like to be treated like a criminal while standing next to your own car after saving someone's life. Amara waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Webb was sitting in his patrol car, running her license, searching for anything he could use to justify this stop. Her license came back clean. No warrants, no criminal history, perfect driving record. The registered owner of the Lexus matched her name exactly. Webb should have apologized and left. The stop was baseless. She had proven ownership. She had hospital credentials. There was no crime, no violation, nothing. But Webb had a different problem now. He had made this stop in full view of hospital security cameras. Other staff members were leaving their shifts, walking past, watching what was happening. If he just let her go, it would look like he had made a mistake. It would look like he had racially profiled a surgeon and had to back down. Webb got out of his patrol car and approached Amara again. His body language had shifted, more aggressive, more defensive. Ma'am, I need you to consent to a search of your vehicle. Amara felt her anger rising, but she kept it controlled. On what basis? The suspicious person report mentioned possible theft from vehicles in this area. So, you want to search my car because someone somewhere might have broken into a car? That's not probable cause. That's not even reasonable suspicion specific to me. If you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't have a problem with a search. The Fourth Amendment doesn't work that way, officer. I don't consent to a search. Am I free to go? Webb's face flushed. No, you're not free to go. Then I'm being detained. On what grounds? You're being uncooperative. Asserting my constitutional rights isn't being uncooperative. It's exactly what the law allows me to do. Foster spoke up quietly. Marcus, maybe we should just verify her employment with the hospital and let her go. She's clearly a doctor here. Webb shot Foster a look that could have melted steel. Stay out of this. He turned back to Amara. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for obstruction. Amara's eyes widened. Obstruction of what? There's no investigation. There's no crime. You stopped me without reasonable suspicion and now you're arresting me for asking questions? Turn around now. Officer, you're making a serious mistake. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon at this hospital. I haven't committed any crime. Everything you're doing right now is being recorded by hospital security cameras. You need to call your supervisor before this gets worse. Webb pulled out his handcuffs. Last warning, what happened next would be analyzed by lawyers, reviewed by internal affairs, discussed in federal court, and used as a training example of exactly how not to conduct a police stop. But in that moment, standing in the hospital parking lot after a 12-hour shift, Dr. Amara Mitchell had to make a choice that no innocent person should ever have to make. Amara turned around slowly. She placed her hands behind her back. The metal handcuffs clicked around her wrists, cold against her skin. The same hands that had just sutured a patient's aorta were now restrained by an officer who couldn't articulate a single legitimate reason for this arrest. Foster looked sick. Marcus, this is wrong. We need to call a supervisor. I said, stay out of it. Webb's voice was tight, strained. He knew he had crossed a line, but pride and fear of looking weak had pushed him past the point of no return. Other hospital staff members had stopped to watch. A security guard approached, hand on his radio. Is there a problem here? Police business. Webb's response was automatic, dismissive. That's Dr. Mitchell. She works here. The security guard's tone was careful but firm. She just finished a 12-hour surgery shift. Webb ignored him. He guided Amara toward his patrol car, one hand on her elbow. She didn't resist. She walked calmly, her mind already shifting into a different mode. Not surgeon mode, attorney mode. Because what Officer Marcus Webb didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to check, was that before Amara went to medical school, she had completed 3 years of law school. She had passed the bar exam. She had worked as a civil rights attorney for 2 years before deciding to pursue medicine instead. She understood constitutional law better than most lawyers. She knew exactly what rights Webb had violated and exactly how to document every second of this encounter. The patrol car's back seat was hard plastic, designed to be hosed down. It smelled like industrial cleaner and stale sweat. Amara sat perfectly still, her hands cuffed behind her back, her shoulders already aching from the position. Webb got in the driver's seat. Foster sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, saying nothing. The drive to the police station took 9 minutes. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the radio crackling with occasional dispatch calls. When they arrived, Webb brought Amara inside. The booking area was busy. 3 other officers were processing arrests: a drunk driver, a domestic violence suspect, a shoplifter, and now a cardiothoracic surgeon who had been loading groceries into her own car. The booking officer was a woman named Sandra Chen. She had been with the department for 16 years. She looked at Amara in her scrubs, hands cuffed, and her expression shifted to confusion. What are the charges? Obstruction of a police investigation. Webb handed over Amara's license and hospital credentials. Chen looked at the credentials. She looked at Amara. She looked back at Webb. What was she obstructing? She refused to consent to a vehicle search and became belligerent. Refusing consent isn't obstruction. Chen's voice was flat. And I don't see belligerent behavior here. She's completely calm. She was argumentative at the scene. Chen had processed thousands of arrests. She could spot a bad arrest from across the room. This was a bad arrest. What was the initial reason for the stop? Suspicious person report in the hospital parking lot. Suspicious how? Webb hesitated. Someone matching her description was reported near vehicles. That's not reasonable suspicion. Chen's expression hardened. That's barely anything. Did you verify she owned the vehicle? Yes, but she refused to cooperate with further investigation. What further investigation? If she owned the vehicle and had hospital credentials, what were you investigating? Webb's face flushed. The suspicious person report indicated possible theft from vehicles. But you just said she owned her vehicle. Chen was no longer asking questions. She was building a record. What specific articulable facts gave you reasonable suspicion that this particular person had committed or was about to commit a crime? Silence. Officer Webb, I need you to answer that question. More silence. Chen made a decision. She had seen officers make bad stops before. Usually, the person got processed, spent a few hours in holding, and got released with charges dropped. But this wasn't a usual case. This was a surgeon. This was someone with resources, education, and the ability to fight back. This was going to become a lawsuit, an internal investigation, and possibly a federal case. She needed to protect herself and document everything carefully. Dr. Mitchell, I'm going to remove your handcuffs. Chen's voice was professional but not unkind. You're going to be processed and held until you can see a judge. That'll probably be tomorrow morning. You have the right to make a phone call. The cuffs came off. Amara's shoulders screamed in relief. She rubbed her wrists where the metal had pressed into her skin. I want to make 2 calls, one to my attorney and one to the hospital's legal department. Chen nodded. You can make both. The first call went to Marcus Chen, no relation to the booking officer. Marcus Chen was one of the top civil rights attorneys in the state. He had won multiple cases against police departments. He had secured settlements in the millions. And he was Amara's husband. Marcus answered on the first ring. Where are you? I've been calling for an hour. I'm at the 3rd precinct. I've been arrested. Long pause. For what? Obstruction. I was loading groceries into my car after my shift. An officer stopped me, demanded a search, and arrested me when I refused. Marcus's voice changed. It went from concerned husband to lethal attorney in half a second. Don't say anything to anyone. Not a single word. I'm calling the hospital's legal team right now, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. Do not answer any questions. Do not make any statements. Do not sign anything. I know. Amara's voice was steady. I need you to do something else. Contact the hospital security office and get the parking lot camera footage from the last 2 hours. Get everything, every angle. And pull my employee file. I want documentation of my shift today. My credentials, everything, all ready on it. Marcus was moving. She could hear him grabbing his keys, his briefcase. This is going to cost them millions, Amara. Millions. I know. The second call went to the hospital's chief legal officer. That conversation lasted 3 minutes. By the time Amara hung up, the hospital had already begun its own investigation and contacted its insurance carrier. Amara was fingerprinted, photographed. Her belongings were cataloged and locked away. Her phone, her wallet, her car keys, her hospital badge, everything. She was placed in a holding cell. The cell was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. A metal bench bolted to the wall. A toilet with no seat. Concrete floor. Fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly. Amara sat on the bench and waited. She wasn't scared. She was angry, but it was a cold, focused anger. The kind of anger that leads to action, not emotion. Other women were brought into nearby cells. A prostitution arrest. A drug possession case. A parole violation. They talked to each other through the bars, sharing cigarettes that weren't allowed, complaining about their arrests. One woman, maybe 30 years old with track marks on her arms, looked at Amara. What'd you do? Nothing. I was loading groceries into my car. The woman laughed bitterly. Yeah, that sounds about right. They got me for standing on a corner. Said I was soliciting. I was waiting for a bus. Amara nodded. The system didn't just fail people. It targeted them. Marcus arrived exactly 20 minutes after the phone call. He didn't come alone. He brought 2 other attorneys from his firm, both specialists in police misconduct cases. He also brought the hospital's chief legal officer and the head of the hospital's medical staff. They demanded to see Amara immediately. Chen brought them to the holding area. Marcus looked at his wife through the bars, and his expression was pure fury. Are you hurt? No. Amara's voice was calm. I'm fine, but we need to move fast. Hospital security footage, body camera footage if Webb was wearing one, witness statements from hospital staff who saw the arrest. Everything. Already started. Marcus turned to Chen. My client is a surgeon who was arrested for the crime of asking questions. She owns the vehicle. She had valid identification. She committed no crime. This arrest is unlawful, and you know it. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. She'll see a judge in the morning. That's not good enough. Marcus's voice was ice. She has surgeries scheduled tomorrow. Patients depending on her. You're holding a cardiac surgeon in a cell because an officer couldn't handle being told no. What happened next showed exactly how much power institutions have when they decide to exercise it. The hospital's chief legal officer, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to the desk sergeant, made one phone call. That call went to the city attorney's office. The conversation lasted exactly 90 seconds. Within 10 minutes, a supervising attorney from the city arrived at the station. He walked directly to the holding area, looked at Amara through the bars, and his face went pale. Release her. Now. Desk Sergeant Chen looked up from his paperwork. We're processing her for the judge tomorrow. Not anymore. The city attorney's voice was flat. This arrest is being vacated. Release her immediately. On whose authority? On mine. And if you want the specifics, on the authority of basic constitutional law that says you can't arrest someone for asking questions. Webb made the call. Webb made an error in judgment that's going to cost this city a fortune. Release her. Do the paperwork later. Amara was out of the cell within 5 minutes. Her belongings were returned. No apologies were offered by the police. just silence and the sound of paperwork being shuffled. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders as they walked out. "You okay?" Amara nodded. "I'm fine, but this isn't over. Not even close." The hospital had already issued a statement by the time Amara got home. Dr. Amara Williams, one of our most distinguished cardiac surgeons, was unlawfully detained this evening while leaving work. We are conducting a full investigation and will cooperate completely with any legal proceedings. The safety and rights of our staff are paramount. The police department issued their own statement an hour later. An incident involving the detention of a hospital employee is under review. We take all complaints seriously and are committed to transparency and accountability. Amara read both statements on her phone and shook her head. Corporate language, meaningless words. The lawsuit was filed 72 hours later. Amara Williams versus the City of Richmond, Officer David Webb, and John Doe officers 1 through 5. The complaint was 41 pages. It detailed everything. The initial stop, the refusal to accept valid identification, the escalation, the false arrest, the imprisonment. It cited specific Supreme Court cases, Terry versus Ohio on reasonable suspicion, Atwater versus City of Lago Vista on arrest standards. It included timestamps from the body camera footage that the department had been forced to preserve, and it included something else. Amara's legal team had found 3 other cases, 3 other incidents where Officer David Webb had arrested people, particularly women of color, for what the complaints called contempt of cop. A teacher arrested for questioning why she was being pulled over, a social worker arrested for filming a traffic stop, a nurse, ironically, arrested for refusing to draw blood from an unconscious patient without a warrant. That last case had made some news 2 years ago, but it had settled quietly. The pattern was clear. Webb had a problem with people who knew their rights and weren't afraid to assert them. The city's insurance carrier reviewed the lawsuit and the evidence. They met with the city attorney's office. They watched the body camera footage. They calculated the exposure, a federal civil rights violation, a clearly unlawful arrest, a plaintiff with an impeccable reputation and credibility, video evidence, a pattern of similar conduct by the defendant officer. Their recommendation was immediate: settle fast, settle before this goes to trial and a jury awards 8 figures. The city disagreed. They wanted to fight it. They argued that Webb had been doing his job, that Amara had been uncooperative, that the arrest was justified under the totality of circumstances. Their outside counsel, a firm that specialized in defending police misconduct cases, reviewed everything and gave the same advice the insurance carrier had given. You will lose this case. You will lose badly. The video is devastating. Settle now while you still have leverage. 6 weeks after the arrest, settlement negotiations began. Amara's opening demand was $18 million. The city's opening offer was $250,000. Marcus laughed when he heard the number. You arrested a cardiac surgeon in a hospital parking lot for asking questions, and you think $250,000 makes this go away? The negotiations dragged on for 3 months. During that time, more information came out. The internal investigation into Webb found that he had falsified reports in at least 7 cases over the past 4 years. Minor details changed, timelines adjusted, facts omitted. Nothing massive, but enough to show a pattern of dishonesty. Webb was placed on administrative leave. His cases were being reviewed by the district attorney's office. 2 convictions had already been overturned because of credibility issues. The police union stood by him publicly. Privately, they told him to retire before he was fired. He refused. Amara continued working. She performed surgeries, she taught residents, she published research, and she gave interviews. She talked about what it felt like to be handcuffed in front of her colleagues. She talked about the assumption of criminality that followed her despite her credentials. She talked about the fear that maybe, just maybe, if she had been more aggressive in asserting her rights, things could have ended differently. Could have ended violently. One interview went viral. A reporter asked her if she regretted not just complying immediately, just getting in the car and sorting it out later. Amara's response was measured but firm. I did comply. I showed identification. I answered questions. I explained who I was and what I was doing. What I didn't do was surrender my constitutional rights because an officer didn't like my tone. And the fact that we're having a conversation about whether I should have been more submissive to avoid being arrested for doing nothing wrong, that's the problem. That's exactly the problem. The settlement came 9 months after the arrest, $16.3 million. The number leaked before the official announcement, and it became national news, one of the largest settlements in the city's history for a single civil rights case. The city released a statement. While we maintain that our officers acted in good faith, we recognize that this incident caused significant harm to Dr. Williams. This settlement reflects our commitment to accountability and our respect for the rights of all citizens. Amara's statement was shorter. I hope this sends a message that constitutional rights aren't optional. They apply to everyone, in every situation, regardless of who's asking you to surrender them. Officer David Webb was terminated 2 weeks after the settlement was announced. He appealed. His appeal was denied. He sued for wrongful termination. That lawsuit was dismissed. He never worked in law enforcement again. The settlement money went to several places. Amara kept enough to cover the disruption to her life, her legal fees, and the emotional toll. The rest, over $14 million, went to create a foundation. The foundation's mission was simple: provide legal representation to people who couldn't afford it when they faced police misconduct, fund civil rights litigation, support community education about constitutional rights. Amara named it after her grandmother, who had marched in Selma and taught Amara that dignity wasn't negotiable. The Williams Foundation funded its first case within 6 months. A teenager arrested for recording police. The case went to trial. The teenager won. More cases followed. The foundation became known for taking on difficult cases that other organizations wouldn't touch because the plaintiffs weren't perfect victims. But Amara understood something that many people didn't. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. There are just people whose rights were violated and a system that needs to be held accountable. 3 years after her arrest, Amara was invited to speak at a police training academy. She almost declined. But then she thought about the good officers she had worked with over the years, the ones who understood that the badge was a responsibility, not a shield. She accepted. The room was filled with recruits, young faces, mostly eager, some skeptical. Amara stood at the podium and looked at them. She didn't start with her story. She started with a question. How many of you became police officers because you wanted to help people? Every hand went up. Good. Keep that in mind for the next 20 minutes, because I'm going to tell you about the day an officer forgot that and how it cost his career, his reputation, and the city $16.3 million. She told them everything. The traffic stop that wasn't a traffic stop. The escalation that didn't need to happen. The arrest that had no legal basis. The viral video that showed the world what happens when authority replaces judgment. But she also told them something else. She told them about the officers who had apologized to her afterward, the ones who had reached out privately to say they were horrified by what happened, the ones who had testified in depositions that Webb's actions violated everything they had been taught. Your badge gives you authority. It doesn't give you immunity from accountability. It doesn't give you the right to violate someone's constitutional rights because they questioned you or because you didn't like their tone. The moment you forget that, you become the problem you swore to solve. One recruit raised his hand. What should Officer Webb have done differently? Everything. He should have run my plates before approaching the vehicle. He would have seen it was registered to me, a professor at the university with no criminal history. He should have explained why he pulled me over instead of demanding compliance. He should have de-escalated when I asked questions instead of treating questions as threats. And when he realized he had no legal basis for the stop, he should have apologized and let me go. Every single decision he made was wrong. Another hand. Do you think all police officers are bad? Amara's answer was immediate. No. I think policing is one of the hardest jobs in the world. I think most officers are trying to do the right thing. But I also think the system protects bad officers for too long, and good officers pay the price when the bad ones make national news. That needs to change. The training session was supposed to last an hour. It went 90 minutes. The recruits asked questions. Real questions. Hard questions. Amara answered all of them. When it ended, several recruits came up to thank her. One of them, a young black woman, waited until everyone else had left. I almost didn't join the force because of what happened to you, but then I thought, maybe I can be different. Maybe I can be the kind of officer who remembers that the people we serve are human beings with rights, not just problems to solve. Amara looked at her for a long moment. Then be that officer. The profession needs people like you. The body camera footage from Amara's arrest is still used in training programs across the country. Not just police training, but law school classes, civil rights seminars, community education programs. It's become a textbook example of how quickly a routine encounter can become a constitutional violation when officers prioritize authority over rights. Legal scholars have written about the case. It appears in constitutional law textbooks. The settlement amount, $16.3 million, is cited in other civil rights cases as precedent for valuing the harm caused by unlawful arrests. But the real impact isn't in the textbooks or the settlement amount. It's in the changes that followed. The city implemented every reform the consent decree required. The Independent Oversight Board has real power now. They can investigate, subpoena, and recommend discipline. They've used that power. In the 3 years since the board was created, they've investigated 47 cases and recommended discipline in 19. The city has followed through on every recommendation. The early intervention system works. It flags officers with patterns of complaints, excessive force reports, or problematic stops. Those officers get additional training, counseling, or reassignment. Some get fired if the pattern continues. The system isn't perfect, but it's better than the nothing that existed before. Officer David Webb filed for bankruptcy 2 years after his termination. The settlement wasn't paid by him personally, it was paid by the city, but his legal fees from fighting the termination and the wrongful termination lawsuit he filed bankrupted him. He left the state. Last anyone heard, he was working private security in another state, nowhere near law enforcement. Amara went back to teaching. She still drives the same Mercedes. She still takes the same route to campus. But now, when she sees police lights behind her, there's a moment of calculation, a moment where she has to remind herself that not every traffic stop is that traffic stop, that most officers are professionals, that she has rights, and she knows how to assert them. That moment of calculation, that split second of fear and preparation, that's the invisible cost of what happened. The part that doesn't show up in settlement agreements or policy reforms. She doesn't talk about the arrest much anymore. She's told the story enough times, but sometimes students ask about it, especially in her constitutional law seminar. She uses it as a teaching tool. Here's what the Fourth Amendment says. Here's what it means in practice. Here's what happens when officers violate it. Here's what accountability looks like when the system works. The Williams Foundation has funded 63 cases since its creation. 41 have settled, 18 went to trial, 4 are still pending. The foundation has a staff of 12 now, including 3 full-time attorneys. They handle cases across 5 states. The settlements and jury awards from those cases have totaled over $38 million. More importantly, they've led to policy changes in 17 different police departments. One case involved a teenager arrested for filming police during a traffic stop. The charges were dropped, but the teenager's phone was kept for 6 months as evidence. The foundation took the case. They won. The settlement included a policy change requiring the return of recording devices within 72 hours, unless they contain evidence of a crime committed by the person recording. Another case involved a woman held in jail for 3 days because an officer misread her identification and thought she had an outstanding warrant. She missed work. She lost her job. She couldn't make rent. The foundation took her case. The jury awarded her $400,000, and the city implemented a new verification system for warrants to prevent the same mistake. These aren't the cases that make national news. They're the cases that happen every day to people who don't have credentials, who don't have platforms, who don't have the resources to fight back. The foundation exists because Amara understands that her case was exceptional only in its visibility. The violation was routine. She was asked once if she regretted going to the coffee shop that morning. If she wished she had just stayed home, avoided the whole situation. Her answer was immediate. No. Because if it hadn't happened to me, it would have happened to someone else. Someone without my education, my resources, my ability to articulate what was happening. And maybe that person wouldn't have had video. Maybe that person wouldn't have been believed. Maybe that person would still be fighting. Or maybe they would have given up. So no, I don't regret it. I regret that it happened at all, but I don't regret that it happened to someone who could do something about it. The $16.3 million wasn't justice. Money isn't justice. But it was accountability. And accountability is the foundation that justice gets built on. Every policy change, every officer trained differently, every person who watches that video and understands their rights a little better, that's the real return on investment. Not the settlement amount, but what it made possible. Amara still teaches constitutional law. She still mentors students. She still serves on the foundation board. And sometimes, when she's driving to campus in the early morning, she thinks about that day. Not with anger anymore, mostly just with clarity. Clarity about how fragile rights are when they depend on the discretion of whoever has authority in that moment. Clarity about how important it is to know those rights, to assert them, to document everything. Clarity about the difference between compliance and surrender. She walked into that training academy not as a victim telling a trauma story, but as an educator presenting a case study. The recruits listened differently than most audiences. They weren't there to feel outraged or sympathetic. They were there to learn how not to destroy their careers before they even started. What should we do if someone questions why we pulled them over? One recruit asked. Answer the question. You don't lose authority by being transparent. You lose authority by acting like the badge means you don't have to explain yourself. Another recruit, older, maybe a career changer, raised his hand. What if someone is being difficult on purpose, trying to provoke us? Then you stay professional anyway, because the moment you let someone else's behavior determine yours, you've lost control of the situation. Webb let his ego make decisions that his training should have overridden. That's how careers end. The training officer running the session added his own perspective. Everything Dr. Williams just described is in your manual. Terry stops require reasonable, articulable suspicion. Arrests require probable cause. Searches require consent or a warrant or exigent circumstances. This isn't new information. What's new is seeing what happens when you ignore it. Amara stayed for another 30 minutes after the formal session ended, answering questions one-on-one. The young black woman, who had spoken to her earlier, came back with a follow-up thought. I want to be the kind of officer who treats people the way you should have been treated, but I'm worried that the culture won't let me, that I'll get pushback for being too soft or not backing up other officers when they make bad stops. Amara's response was direct. Then you find the officers who think like you do, and you support each other. Culture doesn't change from the top down. It changes when enough people at every level decide the old way isn't acceptable anymore. You might not change the whole department, but you'll change your corner of it. And that matters. The foundation continues its work. Every case they take sends a message. Constitutional rights aren't abstract concepts for law school exams. They're daily protections that only work when people know they exist and aren't afraid to invoke them. The foundation has expanded beyond just litigation. They run community education programs now, know your rights workshops in churches, community centers, high schools. They teach people what Amara knew that day in the parking lot, how to assert rights without escalating, how to document encounters, how to survive a stop even when the officer is wrong. Because survival is part of the calculation for too many people. Not justice, not vindication. Just getting home safely and dealing with everything else later. The foundation tries to shift that calculation, to make it possible for people to assert rights without fear, because they know someone will back them up if it goes wrong. Amara drives past that parking lot sometimes. The hospital is still there, same building, same staff section where she parked that morning. She doesn't avoid it, doesn't take a different route. It's just a parking lot. What happened there was about the officer's choices, not the location. She wonders occasionally what would have happened if she hadn't been who she was. If she'd been a housekeeper instead of a surgeon, if she'd been undocumented, if she'd had a prior record, would the settlement have been $16.3 million? Would there have been a settlement at all? The honest answer is probably not. And that's the problem the foundation exists to solve. The video still circulates. Every few months it goes viral again when something similar happens somewhere else. People watch it and see themselves, see their parents, their siblings, their friends. See how quickly normal becomes dangerous when someone with authority decides your presence is suspicious. Webb never apologized. Not publicly, not privately. He gave one interview where he claimed he was just doing his job, that he followed his training, that the outcome was unfortunate but not his fault. The interviewer asked him if he'd watched the body camera footage. He said he had. The interviewer asked if he'd do anything differently. Long pause. Then, I'd probably call for backup sooner. That answer told you everything you needed to know. Not I wouldn't have made the stop. Not I should have de-escalated. Not I violated someone's rights and destroyed my career over nothing. Just I'd call for backup sooner. As if more officers would have made the illegal arrest somehow more legal. Amara heard about the interview. She didn't respond publicly. What was there to say? Webb had learned nothing, which meant the termination was exactly the right outcome. Some people can't be reformed. They can only be removed. The policy changes matter more than any individual case. The oversight board, the intervention system, the training reforms, those affect thousands of interactions every year. Most of those interactions don't become lawsuits or viral videos. They're just traffic stops that end with a warning or a ticket and everyone goes home. But they end that way because officers know someone is watching, know that patterns get flagged, know that the department meant it when they said constitutional rights aren't negotiable. $16.3 million bought more than just a settlement. It bought attention, accountability, and institutional change. It bought a foundation that's still fighting cases today. It bought training sessions where recruits learn that the badge is a responsibility that comes with consequences when you abuse it. And it bought Amara the platform to make sure what happened to her becomes harder for it to happen to someone else. Not impossible. Human beings with authority will always find ways to abuse it. But harder, more visible, more costly. That's not justice. Justice would be a world where the stop never happens, where officers see a person loading groceries and don't see a threat, where constitutional rights are so ingrained in police culture that violations are unthinkable, not just discouraged, but accountability is the next best thing. It's what you build while you're working toward justice. Every case the foundation takes, every officer who thinks twice before escalating, every person who knows their rights and isn't afraid to use them. That's accountability, creating the conditions where justice might eventually be possible. This case was disturbing, but the one on the right ends in a way no one expects.